There are two types of exemptions for buildings and works from planning. There are exemptions without exceptions, which are works that can be done in any circumstances without the need for planning approval. And there are exemptions with exceptions, which are works that are exempt from planning unless there is an explicit trigger for those works. Clause 6202-1 are the buildings and works that are exempt from needing a planning permit, even if there is a planning permit trigger for them somewhere else in the planning scheme. These are the exemptions without exceptions. There are 26 exemptions listed here, and if you are doing something that meets one of these exemptions, then you can do it without needing a planning permit. For example, if you were putting a stairwell fire escape on a building within a heritage overlay to conform with required fire protection legislation, then that stairwell can be installed without the need to apply for a planning permit, and despite the fact there is a planning permit trigger under the heritage overlay to externally alter a building. Clause 6202-2 are the buildings and works that are exempt unless there is a specific trigger for these works elsewhere in the planning scheme. These are known as exemptions with exceptions. There are 27 of these exemptions, and you can see the first one here is a fence. This means you can put up a fence without a planning permit unless it says explicitly somewhere else in the planning scheme that a permit is required to put up a fence. For example, if a property is in a heritage overlay, there is an explicit trigger for a fence visible from a street or public park. If the fence you are putting up is not visible from the street or public park, then it can be erected without the need to get a planning permit. However, if it is visible from the street or public park, then there is a trigger for the planning permit. It is rare that buildings and works being undertaken by a private entity will qualify for the exemptions without exceptions of Clause 6202-1 of the planning scheme. It is much more likely the exemptions of Clause 6202-2 will be applicable. Some of the most common exemptions we typically advise clients on here are the internal rearrangement of building or works, provided the gross floor area of the building or the size of the works is not increased and the number of dwellings is not increased. Repairs and routine maintenance to an existing building or works. Services normal to a building other than a dwelling, including chimneys, flues, skylights, heating and cooling systems, hot water systems, security systems and cameras, downpipes, window shading devices, or similar. If you think you can avail of the exemption, make sure you check under the zone and overlay affecting the site that there is no explicit trigger for the buildings and works you are doing, and if you are in doubt, you can contact our office.